Well, here we are at episode number 5, Becky, and on our communications, and we're talking about logistics of communications today because we want to get down to the nitty-gritty details of how you actually make this work in a real world, right?
Yeah, we've talked about relationships, we've talked about trust, and all of those things are important, but then there's the actual practical, how do I actually write the email type things that we have to get into.
That's right, and how do you make it work, and how do you keep it working? So we're going to talk actually about fixing some of those things, the actual system. One thing that I kind of wanted to bring up is that there's a lot of communication gurus who have a new system and a new way of doing things, but and sometimes this can be so overwhelming, and you hear about so-and-so, they did this and it worked out perfectly. Just do what works for you.
Yes.
And so we're going to be talking about what works for us and maybe get some ideas out of that, but really don't stress about it and don't be overwhelmed by it. Just do what works for you, and we'll follow some basic principles here. And so actually we've got 7 rules that we just made up.
Yeah, I like that that's your heading. 7 rules that we just made up. They work, trust me.
Yeah, we've been working these for a long time. So the first one is in our communication is to be creative. And the question to ask yourself is, am I clear and motivating? And we need to learn to speak and write so that people actually hear what we're saying. And the fact is that people remember, in fact, we think in pictures and terms. Jesus told parables. So allow yourself to be creative. A lot of times, if you're going to put the responsibility for communication on yourself, which we have to do, then it's our job to come up with something that people are actually hearing and actually listening to and then remembering.
Yeah. If you're a really boring speaker, especially too, like if you're really monotone, there's no excitement, there's no passion when you speak, the more that you can draw it out, the better that it is, because people are going to fall asleep whenever you do talk to them. So make sure you are creative. A lot of our systems we actually put in picture format, or we put them in numbers, like, you know, step 1, step 2, step 3, so that it's very clear and concise for people to remember. Right.
Okay, and number 2 is concise. What did you know? And be short and to the point. Highlight the important information, date, time, place, who is responsible. And one time I had one lady working in our ministry, and she'd write me like foolscap size messages of things that she needed to communicate with me, and I told her, I said, you need to just highlight, you know, if you can't shorten it, just highlight what you need me to know. And so the next one she sent me was another foolscap, and it had stars right around the entire thing.
I need you to know everything.
Yeah, I need you to know everything. Yeah. We feel that what we're talking about is so important, but the fact is that if you don't highlight it and point out what needs to be remembered, and those are pivotal things, right? Like sometimes I remember, oh, there's something today, and I don't remember what it is, but at least I remember the dates.
Good job.
So that helps, yeah.
Yeah, and so especially with written communication and verbal communication, if you need to tell somebody something, tell them that one point, right? Don't go off on an essay, don't go off and write a novel for them, because the truth is people only have a very short attention span, and they're not going to retain everything that you say. And emails that are really, really long, you open it up and you just feel like,
oh, it's discouraging.
You're like, I'll do that later, right?
That's right.
It just makes you want to move on to something else. So be concise.
Yeah, okay. So the third one is to be comprehensive. And that is to include everything that you need, right? We need to work from the assumption that people have not understood what we've said. So don't leave out any details. And I find this is a common problem. Is well, some people are terrible at this. They'll start talking about something, you don't even know what they're talking about because they haven't given you names. They've just said she or he or whatever. You got to assume that people haven't heard anything, because they might not have. They might not have heard certain points. And so we need to be very comprehensive and include everything, even if you think they already know it.
Right. So an example would be, do you remember that meeting we had on Wednesday talking about this new program and how, you know, you got to give people like a background a little bit and give them what they need to know. I just want to remind you that whatever. I found recently we've just been changing up some of our accounting stuff in our staff, in our admin staff, and I've had like probably 6 face-to-face meetings with the same group of people over and over again, and we're still learning the system, because it's not easy for people to learn how to do something in a new way. It's not easy for people to learn a new process. So a lot of times we figure, I've already told you once, you should get it, or we've already done this once, you should get it. But the truth of the matter is, people need time for it to become something that's ingrained. And that's going to take time. And so you have to be patient with the learning process. And if you get frustrated with people when they don't understand, then you're going to make it difficult for them to come to you and say, I don't get it. And so you got to just, it's okay if people don't get it, even if you've said it 10 times. You got to keep saying it until they get it. If it's important enough that we get it, then it's important enough that we keep communicating.
Right. Again, it's our responsibility. Okay, so number 1 was creative, number 2 was be concise, number 3 was comprehensive, and number 4 is a closed circuit. For those of you that understand electricity, when you turn the switch on, it closes the circuit and the light comes on, right? And so the question is, has what I said been acknowledged? In other words, have they responded, given me a thumbs up? That's one of the best things ever. And don't wait around. If you're not sure, check it out. Maybe they didn't get the message. And again, it's our responsibility. So close the circuit.
The next one is complete. So that's point number 5. If you want people to know something, communicate it 3 times. I remember when I was doing print journalism in college, I didn't remember a lot from my studies, but one thing I do remember was in the advertising class, they told us that for most advertising to be effective, somebody has to have seen that message 3 times before it registers that, hey, they're talking to me. And so advertising companies have spent billions of dollars to figure out how people remember and all that kind of stuff. But yet somehow we think that if we just say it once, people should get it. They should remember it, right? Not only should they remember it, they should understand it perfectly. And so we have to, it's just a rule of thumb, everything that we need to communicate, we have to communicate it a minimum of 3 times before people actually get, oh yeah, it's about me, or I need to know this, or I need to remember this. So it's good if that communication can be in different ways. So if you send out an email, right, follow up with another note or another message, and then when you run into them in the hallway, did you get that email that I sent you about that meeting we have tomorrow? So make sure that you're communicating it more than once and in more than one ways, because people aren't going to remember.
Right, and the result that you want is that communication has to land somewhere. Did it end up on the calendar where it should be? Did it end up in the accounting department where it should be? Did it end up in a meeting? Whatever it may be, that's how we know if it's been completed.
And it always has to be in writing. Even if you have a meet up in the hallway, at the end send a message, here's what we agreed on that we're going to do for tomorrow's thing. Because if it's not in writing, it's easy for people to misunderstand, misinterpret, or did we say Wednesday or did we say Thursday? It's so easy for it to happen.
So true. I always have to go back and look, saying, right?
Me too.
Okay, number 6 is to be inclusive, and this is the question, does everybody know who needs to know? And then after that, who else needs to know? All right, so that's very important to make sure everybody knows. That's one of the main weaknesses of communication, failed communication, is that not everybody heard who needs to hear.
And even if it's not the people that are involved, so for example, we're doing a missionary retreat this weekend, right? All of our missionaries know, but some of our non-missionary staff don't know. And so it's like, am I going, what's happening? Are we supposed to be, what are we doing this weekend? So it's really easy to communicate to the people that, well, yeah, you need to know because you're in this group, but we also need to remember those that need to know, not because they're actually participating, but because they need to know you're not participating or you're not involved, or so there's no confusion there.
Okay, and then number 7 is to archive it. Write it down, right? Write everything down. You got to keep notes and keep up with yourself so that you know what you know. Because I don't know, if you're busy like us, it's just so easy to forget. Somehow stuff has to fall off the table, and when it does, it's just better to have it written down. Besides, keeping a notebook is so important anyway, isn't it? By your bed, whatever. How many great ideas have you had and then you couldn't remember when you went to?
I've had great ideas I've written down, then I couldn't read my handwriting anymore. That's
another
different subject. Communicating with yourself clearly. So when we're talking about write it down, there's things that we have to write down. Write down the important information, like the dates, the timeline, those kind of things, the numbers, right? The dollars, whatever it is. Also make sure that you write down the tasks and the timeline, right? So if there's a meeting, who's responsible for what? When are they supposed to have it ready for? And then the name of who's responsible. You're not just writing down, we have a meeting on Wednesday. It's, we have a meeting with these people in this room at this time. So-and-so's going to prepare this, and so-and-so's responsible for it, so that we have it all where we need to.
Okay, so as we wrap it up, we just wanted to mention 4 communication systems that work for us, and this is, in my mind anyway, this is how we've kind of got it divided up. The first one is information flow and decision making, and we use Slack for that, which is an online program, free version, for the app. Facebook chat, we use that for our board of directors in Thailand. We use emails for our board of directors in Canada because they're a little older, and so different stuff like that. We got weekly physical meetings at the home base. You've got to have meetings
face to face.
The second kind is the vision and direction. You've got to communicate the vision and direction.
Always.
We do that at Monday Chapels at home base, and that's live fed on Facebook as well. It goes to everybody, and it's archived on allpurpose.com blog.
Vision and direction for each department too, not just overall, ministry reach, teach, and mobilize. Like what's our vision for the accounting department, right? What's our vision for the kids program for every department?
Yes, you've got to have meetings, separate meetings for every department. And then overall for that, the annual Victory Asia Leadership Summit is a great place for vision and direction, and that goes all across the nations. And then the third kind of communication is the health and unity of the ministry, of the family of the ministry and the individuals in particular. So that's things like we do Sunday church together. We have a midweek, Wednesday prophetic prayer time together, an hour together. We've got coffee shop and workspace meetings and all those kind of things. And again, you've got to spend time with people if you're if your communication is going to work.
Yeah,
and then the fourth one is the researchable stuff. You've got to have some place where people can go to get information they need. It might be your handbooks, your policy procedures. We try to keep everything on our website so that anybody can go and look at it. And people will always ask, how can I get details on 7 weeks in Asia? Well, did you try the website? It's all there. So that's the thing, keep the communication going in all those areas.
So those are some practical things that you can use, systems that you can use to help you make sure that you're communicating effectively, thoroughly, and that nobody's missing the important details.
That's right. Okay, bless you. We got one more coming up on this number 6, which is going to be talking about communicating to your partners, communication that keeps you alive.